Page 61, Tractate Chérovin, page 61, 19 lines from the top of the page. אמר רב יוסף, אמר רמי בר אבא, אמר רב הונא, עיר שיושבת על שפת הנחל. Before we go to that, I want to remind you, not long ago we studied about a subject about tzrifim, meaning if there are some huts around the city. You remember, David? Mm-hmm. So we said that it was a discussion, and we said that we count individually. Each person counted individually. Here we have a situation that there is a city that is in the border of a river. What the Rishonim, the rabbis, explained to us that in those situations, sometimes, some season, you have overflow of the water, and some season it's dry. Our city, the flood is relatively rare. I don't remember. Remember in 03 we have Isabel. So the city was overflowed, especially downtown. Mm-hmm. Now here they said, if you have a city that's located in the edge of the river, basically they have like a valley, then you have a city, you go to the part, you cross the Naval Academy, you go to the bridge area, you see some houses, is like in a hill, and then we go downhill, you have those waterfront. Okay, so he said, Im yesh lefanea daka arba'a. If at the front of the entire city we have a small partition, but they have a 4 cubits high. So what cubit high? In order to avoid them to go down to the valley. The correct Ivrit here is arba, not arba'ah. So they said, if you don't have a partition that divided between the houses and the water, so Rashi said, it's a little dangerous, because people can, if you don't have a partition, people can fall the water, especially those who have children. So what do you do? Modedin la misfat hanachal. You measure the Shabbat limit from where? From the border of that waterfront, because the city it's considering up to that point, and the entire city we consider, say, Hilchot Shabbat as a 4 cubits. So you take the Shabbat limit from that corner, like every other city. Think about women that have a little children, and like sometimes they're hyper, they run out, and they live at those houses close to the water, and you don't have a partition. It's very dangerous. So they're afraid. So basically those inhabitants that live there, the category that the Gemara explained here, it's a temporary living, which means the same way as you remember we said about the huts, that it's a temporary living, and we counted individually. Here too we have the same category, ve'im lav. But if there's no partition between the city and the water, ein modedim la ela mipetach beito. So you have to measure individually for each and every one. So the Mishnah Berurah said, in Biur Halacha, they said that you have to measure from the last house. Last house. In other words, each one individually, but you go by the final one. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan, and also in Machzit HaShekel, many other Rishonim said the real concern is that it was a season in those cities that all of a sudden was flooded. If you remember the Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, so you have a sudden situation that the water come and overflow the city. So the way that Rashi explained here, it's not that way. We understand that it's just the dangers of going there, but you see here there are some, to this very day you have some cities that have these concerns, that it turns in a certain time during the year that all of a sudden you have a water that overflow. So if you live especially in those houses on the high hill, so it's the problem is, since you don't have a property line that goes around that houses that you can use, take for example if you have a playground, a place for children to play, etc., that it's usually around the development. If you don't have that, because everyone is afraid that the children will go to, God forbid, to the water, and it's because it's a high sea. So we, as far as the Eruv, we categorize that as a temporary, and each one we judge him individually. Amar le'Abaye, daka arba amot amar zanala. Ma yishna mikol dakei de'alma de'arba'a. You teach us that we need to have this thin partition that have a 4 cubit in order to those houses, in order to consider those houses as a city. So he said, what the difference between this one and the others? We always require 4 handbreadth, so why you differentiate? Remember we said in the page 59 that there are several situations that we have between two development, you use a small thin partition. Amar le Rav Yosef responded to Abaye and he said, Hatam lo be'ita tashmishta, hacha be'ita tashmishta. Come on. Over there in 59, we don't have a fear of people that use it. So therefore, it's very different. Over there, we just put that partition to remind people that they're living in different development, and therefore it's a different domain. But here, people are afraid to use it. So you need to have a high level of partition in order to use it. The 4 handbreadth is just avoiding people from getting in. You're putting some signal, some sign, so you basically circumscribe the size. You limit the size of the ability for people to walk from one domain to another, to give them a signal. But here you need a high, people are afraid to go there. Amar Rav Yosef menamin ala. How do I know that? That the measurement of the city depend upon the partition that separate between the city and the river. The Tanya, Itir Rabbi shiyu bnei gader yordin lechamtan, ve'en bnei chamtan olin legader. It was 2 cities. One was called Chamtan, and the other one is called Gader. Gader is in a high, and Chamtan is a little lower. So, my Tama, what's the difference here? Because this, you may say the same way as you can go from Gader to Chamtan. Why? Because within the 2,000 cubits from one to another, so the same way they can go the other way around. He says, Lav mishum dehane avud daka. Isn't that because people of Gader, they build a thin partition at the city border in order for people not to fall in that sip between the two borders. So therefore you consider that as a permanent city, because they have some domain that they can use even they now. you have a huge distance between the houses in each city, but you should measure the whole people of city of Gader from the borderline that it's within the 2,000 cubit of Hamtan, like every other city. So therefore, they can go, and the people of Gader can go in any place in Hamtan, because all the houses is partake of that 2,000 cubit. However, people of Hamtan, they did not build a thin partition at the city border, so they cannot use that place outside of their houses, because they afraid that they go and they fall in the high sea. So what do? The Mishnah Berurah said you have to count from the last house that belonged to that municipality. So that's the source of Rav Yosef Halacha, that in any place that you're afraid to use the around the house, you don't consider that as a city. Now, to clarify this, imagine that this is Gader and this is Hamtan, and what happened is, you have, if you take the airline, the airspace, you have the 2,000 cubit. But basically Hamtan, in order to go, you need to go downhill. Now, there are 2 points here. Number one, to understand the distance between the two. Number two, to understand that there is one city is in a high hill, the other one is in lower. Now, what we understand? Rashi said the key point is that people cannot pass easily. The people from Gader can go downhill, and people from Hamtan need to go uphill. Now, how we'll be able to allow both cities to go in each other? So basically, what Rabbi said, he said that people from Gader can go down, people from Hamtan cannot go up. So he said the first understanding is it's because of the fear. Okay, but here you have an issue, because what's the fear for people to go up? Since the people from Hamtan needs to go to Gader, need to go uphill. So he said, Rav Dimi came from Bavel, from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Amar tatrugei metartegei lehu bnei Gader levnei Hamtan. So he said that it was I would say, different mentality in the two cities. And what happened is they involved sometimes with a disputation and fight between the two over all kind of other issues. That's we derive from that. So it was the issue of a assault from from people from one place to another. So in the army they tell you, if the tank is at the top of the hill, they always control anybody who's on lower level. So the people in Gader are basically on the top of the hill, and they assault the other people of the city. So he said, "Umay hitir." So what does that mean when Rabbi used the idea of allow? So it was only idea that they come because it was fights between the two cities. So the idea is that we are not speaking about Chum Shabbat. When you bring the Braita saying that Rabbi allow people from Gader to go to Hamtan and people from Hamtan not to go to Gader, it means that that sometimes the opposite people of the Gader get, some Rishonim said that people from Gader get drunk or have all kind of issues, and then they're afraid that people from Hamtan come and try to kill them or try to assault them. So they make all kind of rules to separate them. But he said, Hitkin, that they follow. In those days they listen to the Bet Din or to the rabbis. So Rabbi put the rules that the Bnei Hamtan cannot go up to Gader. Even that as far as the Tchum Shabbat, it was within the Shabbat limits. Umayishna Shabbat. So why they did it in particular in Shabbat, that try to avoid fights? Why Rabbi forbade them to go there on Shabbat? You can forbid them to go during the week if they're fighting. It says the Shchicha B'Shichut. What happened on Shabbat?
Get drunk.
Yeah, sometimes people get married and happy and they get drunk. So they get drunk, sometimes they start fighting. Right? כי אז ללאתם נמי מתרגלהו. So what's the issue, they asked? If that's the story, so people from Gader can ascend to Hamatan, and then they fight them back, right? So why Rabbi allowed the people from Gader to go downhill? Said, Kalba velo matei shev shnin lo navach. Oh, they said that a dog, it's like a metaphor, right? They said that a dog outside of the cities, so his place will not bark for 7 years. So it means that usually people are less, behave less strong when they are outside of their domain. They feel more comfortable. When you see playing on the baseball, and they go to different cities, so what happened? Usually they said when the hometown they feel better, the players, right? So they said the fear was that when they get involved, they go to those clubs in our language, right? They go to those places and they start fighting. So when it's no issue of a fight, when people from Gader go to Hamtan, so we allow them to go there. So the Gemara asks, Hashtan name metartigei bnei Hamtan levnei Gader. So it can go also that the resident of Hamtan, their home territory, will take revenge and assault the resident of Gader. Right? So why didn't... so he said, Kule hai lo kaifelu. So far that will be they will not be submissive such an extent. So even they are outside of their domain, they are not so much ready to accept the authority of the other people of Hamtan. That the people of Hamtan will try to pay them back. So that's the reason, again, originally why he put rules that people from Gader will go to Hamtan not. Rav Safra go to a very different direction. He said, guess what? Here we're talking about different situation. Remember we talked in a city that he made like a rainbow, like a bow. He said, Ir asuya kekeshet avai. Rav Safra hold that Hamtan was made like a bow. You remember we talked about bow? That the two sides of the city have a distance of 4,000 cubits or more. So therefore we can go by 2,000 cubits from each one of these corner of the bow. And Gader was a regular city that the entire city was a four. We hold it like in the 4 cubits. So in Hamtan it was 2,000 cubits from the last house of Gader. So therefore Rabbi allowed the people of Gader to go to ascend to a place of Hamatan. But since the people of Hamtan, their city border, especially those people who live at the middle of the bow, it's stopped at the midst of the Gader because it have much distance. So Rabbi forbid to people of Hamtan that live down in the middle of to go up to the top of Gader, that it's out of their domain. So imagine that, let's say this is the bow. Okay, let me use some pictures of the Meorot Daf because they use the keshet. Okay. I just want to use some examples here because okay. Everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay. This is the bow. Now imagine if someone live here, in this part. So from his house to the house of Gader, it's much distance than someone who live here. And because Gader is the top of the hill and Hamtan is on the bottom, that's the reason why we differentiate between, according to Rav Safra, between Hamtan and Gader. Gader can go with no limitation, Hamtan have a limitation. Rav Dimi בר חיננה אמר, אנשי עיר גדולה ואנשי עיר קטנה הווי. So Rav Dimi bar Chinana said that here we talk about two cities that are close to each other, but one, it's like Gader was a large city, and Hamtan was a small. So if you remember yesterday we talked about large city and a small city. So if you remember, yesterday we discussed a situation that you go by the border. Okay, I want to use this example. So if you have this on the border, this is a small city, this is a large city. So from this borderline of a large city, they can go up to here, which means people from this city can go for this small city because it's part of the 2000. You see, you start from here, from the city border, you go 2000. You already cross the small city. If you go from this border, look how far you can go in the large city. Now, in that sense, imagine if one city, it's Gader. Gader is like top of the hill, it's a large city. And Hamtan was a small city down bottom. So basically Hamtan was part of the limit of Gader, because again it's part of the 2000. Versus Gader, it's only part wait, this is Hamtan, this is Gader. So Hamtan, right? Hamtan was fully in Gader. Gader is portion in Hamtan. Rav Kahana matnei hachi, which means Rav Kahana hold that Rav Safra said that it's a bow, that Gader was a city that was a bow, and Rav Dimi bar Chanana hold that Gader Hamtan was a large city and a small city that attached to each other. Rav Yomi matne hacha, which means Rav Safra and Rav Dimi bar Chinana, that both hold the way that Rabbi said, Chad amar ira asuya kekeshet havai, v'chad amar anshe ir ktana v'anshe ir gdula havai. So one of them said that Gader was a city shaped like a bow, and one of them said the people of Hamtan were residents of a small city and people of Gader were residents of a large city. So again, it's a different way to look why a Rebbe rules that people from Gader can go to Hamtan, and Hamtan will not go to Gader. Mishnah. אנשי עיר גדולה מהלכים את כל עיר קטנה. So, you remember that we said that we have to have a distance of 141 and 1/3 cubit between the two. So he said the residents of the large city can go and walk through the entire small city, that it's within the 2,000 cubit. ואנשי עיר קטנה מהלכים את כל עיר גדולה. And the resident of a small city may walk through the entire large city, which means it can be a part of that it exceeded more than 2,000 cubits. כיצד? So he said, מי שהיה בעיר גדולה ונתן את עירובו בעיר קטנה. If someone live in the large city and he put his עירוב in the small city, מהלך את כולה וחוצה לה 2,000 אמה. He can go for the entire city, he left the עירוב, and outside 2,000 cubit. Why? Because if he dwell in the city, even if he does that by using the Eruv, it's considering the entire city as a 4 cubit, and therefore he start his Shabbat limit outside of the city border. Now, Rabbi Akiva אומר, אין לו אלא מקום עירובו, ממקום עירובו 2,000 אמה. Rabbi Akiva said that he has to start his measurement not from the city border, but from the place that he is doing Shabbat, such as can be middle of the city. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva hold that here the city is considering 4 cubit only for someone who's dwelled there by himself. But if he put the Eruv there, by, for example, he walked there and he put the Eruv there, that doesn't give him the same category as someone who's permanently staying there for Shabbat. Amar lahu Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said to them, to the sages who disagree with him, אי אתם מודים לי בנותן מקום עירובו במערה שאין לו אלא ממקום עירובו 2,000 אמה. You remember we said that if someone place a Eruv in a cave, and so you don't agree with me that if someone place an Eruv in a cave, he has only 2,000 cubit from the place of his Eruv, and it means that the entire cave is not considered a 4 cubit. And now, אמרו לו, אימתי? They said to him, when we hold that it's considering us have a 4 cubit, בזמן שאין בדיורים, אבל יש בדיורים, מהלכת כולה וחוץ על 2,000 אמה. Only if there's no one living in a cave. Like cave, people don't live. So if it's a situation that people live there, so it's different. So the same applies to the city that have inhabitants or doesn't have. נמצא קל תוכה מעל גבה, which means you derive from that the more lenient the halacha in regard to Eruv placed inside the cave is sometimes more lenient than halacha in the Eruv place in the area above the cave. ולמודד שאמרו נותנים 2,000 אמה, and for one who's measuring the Shabbat limit, so we said that give him a 2,000 cubit, it means שאפילו סוף מידתו קלה במערה, that even the end of his measurements, it's at the middle of a cave, so he can go further into the cave even if the cave is doesn't have anyone there. So it means even that the Tana Kama disagree with Rabbi Akiva and hold that if someone left his Eruv in a city that has inhabitants, it's considering like 4 cubits only, that they agree that if he decided to dwell in one place and the end of the Shabbat limit is in a cave that people live there, so it's not considering 4 cubits, and it can go only up to 2,000 cubits and no more. So why they use the term of me'ara, the cave, and not else? So there is a Sfat Emet that explain that as soon as you see in the Gemara several application of cave, and that's the reason they use it. Or you can say that in those days it was a possibility. 61b. אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, שבת בעיר חרבה. If a person stay in Shabbat in a city that is desolate from his inhabitants, but they still have a wall, לרבנן מהלכת כולה וחוצה לה 2,000 אמה. According to the sages, he can go the entire city and outside 2,000 cubits. Why? Because a place that they have a partition, it's considering 4 cubits for someone who's dwelling there. However, הניח עירובו בעיר חרבה, אין לו ממקום עירובו אלא 2,000 אמה. But if he placed the Eruv in the city that is desolated, and he's basically dwell there by the Eruv, so you have only 2,000 cubits. So the city, it's part of the 2,000 cubit. Even the sages hold that the place that they have a partition around it, it's considering 4 cubit. Even someone dwell there only by having the Eruv. But they agree that if people not inhabitants there, it's not considering 4 cubits. That's the way Rashi understand it. Another opinion, Rabbi Elazar Omer, אחד שבת ואחד הניח. Rabbi Elazar hold that whether he establishes Shabbat residence to he's physically there, or he places an Eruv there, מהלכת כולה וחוצה לה 2,000 אמה. He may walk through it and all of it and another 2,000 cubits beyond it. Okay, so according to Rabbi Elazar, the sages hold that any place that they have a partition, it's considering 4 cubits for someone who's basically dwell there by the Eruv, regardless if people live there or not. So now they said, Meiti ve'amar len Rabbi Akiva, אתם מודים לי ונותן את עירובו במערה שאין לו מקום עירובו ל2,000 אמה? We just said, remember, it's part of the Mishnah discussion, that you agree with me that if someone put his Eruv in a cave, that he have only 2,000 cubits from that location. אמרו לו, מתי בזמן שאין בדיורין? באין בדיורין מודו לי. So they said to him, that's apply when the cave is no resident. But when it is no residence, the sages concede to Rabbi Akiva that one is only 2,000 cubits from the place of his Eruv. So basically it's a question, because now you see that Rabbi Eliezer hold different than the sages. He hold that desolated city, it's considering only 4 cubits for someone who's put the Eruv there. My en badiurim. So what's the meaning that he said that there's no residence? Eina re'uya ledira, that people cannot occupy it. For example, you have those caves that the walls in the cave basically fall apart and weak, So you don't have a valid partition. So it's not considering 4 cubits. You cannot. A person who dwell there is like he dwell in an open space that doesn't have any type of partition. But if it's a regular place that they have a partition, or people who left there and it's a desolate, and now Rabbi Eliezer hold that according to the sages, 4, it's considering like 4 cubits if someone put the Eruv there. So therefore the sages respond to Rabbi Akiva and they said that we do not agree with you that the cave it's not considering a 4 cubit, regardless if he was there or he left the Eruv there, only if those walls are no longer existed. So they said, Tashma, we now need to bring a proof, follow the Shmuel's idea. שבת בעיר אפילו גדולה כאנטיוחה, במערה אפילו היא כמערת צדקיהו מלך יהודה. So again, they're bringing an exaggeration language, which is a large side. So the city of Antioch, it's a probably large city. So it's a northern part of modern day Syria. They said in the Koran Gemara, they said that it's a large city. So if it's in a Tzidkiyahu cave, again it's a king of Judah that he put a large cave under Yerushalayim, and he tried to run away from the army of Nebuchadnezzar when he conquered the city. Babylonian king conquered the city and destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. So the book of Jeremiah, chapter 52, they explain that he built underground cave that go up to the city of Jericho. So they said, Me'alechet kula, you see that they can walk the entire city or the entire cave, v'chutza la'alpayim amah, and even out 2,000 cubit. Why? Because we consider all of that as a 4 cubit only. So how you prove it from here? He says, Katane ir dumya dim ara. So we compare the city is similar to the cave. Ma me'ara chareva af ir chareva. So the same as a cave is uninhabited. So the city must be one that is desolate. Veshavat ein, aval iniach la. But if where he establishes Shabbat resident, which means that he's physically there, fine, yes. So halacha apply. But if he places an Eruv there, no. He doesn't have a measure of 2,000 cubits from the edge of the city. So he said, Mani, who is the Tana that hold that? Ileima Rabbi Akiva, Mai Irya Chareva, Afilu Yeshiva Nami. If you tell me that that's applied to Rabbi Akiva, so why the Gemara speaks specifically about city that is desolated, that is not inhabitants? Even a city that is inhabited. So Rashi explains that they use the desolate as just as an example. El alav Rabbanan, you must say that the Braita go by the sages. V'tama de shavat in, aval iniach lo. The reason that this city, desolated city, they're considering a 4 cubits, it's only because he's physically was there. But if he just left the Eruv there, no. So Rashi said that that it has to be that way, that someone who's physically been there. So in other words, we differentiate between someone who's physically there versus someone who just left the Eruv there. And they said that's basically a contradiction to what Rabbi Eliezer said. He holds that according to the sages, even a city that is desolated is considering 4 cubit for someone who's making Eruv there. So the Gemara responds and said, Lo teima ir Dumya dim'ara. You cannot compare the two, the city to a cave. Ela eima me'ara dumya de'ir. But you compare cave to the city. Ma'ir yesheva, af me'ara yesheva. The same that we are talking about city that inhabitants, the same here we talk about cave that have people who live there. Rabbi Akiva, now we have to say that the Braita follow Rabbi Akiva that said, "De'amar en lo mimkom meruvo la'alpayim amah." That you have to go only 2,000 cubit from place he put an eruv. So they said, "Uveshavat modei." But if someone is physically dwell in a city or in a place that they have a partition, so Rabbi Akiva hold that he has a 2,000 cubit around the city or around the partition. So therefore the Braita said that he has that if someone dwell in a city or in a cave, he can go 2,000 cubit to every corner. And the Braita come to teach us that it's specifically if he dwell there physically by himself. So it's considering 4 cubits. But if he left the eruv, it's not considering 4 cubits. So you use it only, according to Rabbi Akiva, the place that he is physically is there. So they say, "V'hakim arat tzidkiyahu katani." We are talk about Tzidkiyahu the king. So remember what we said, that the king built it in order to escape from the Nebuchadnezzar. He built it under the city of Yerushalayim. So, but people not live there. Or Rashi said is another option. It happened that Hashtalet labad Yurin. That now when we have in a Talmud discussion, is no longer inhabitants. It was at the time that Tzidkiyahu need to escape. You have escape route. But now it's not applicable, right? The people not live there. So the Gemara responds, Kim arat Tzidkiyahu velo kim arat Tzidkiyahu. Yes, we said that it's like the cave of Tzidkiyahu and not the cave of Tzidkiyahu. What do you mean? Kim arat Tzidkiyahu gdola. We hold the same as a large size of a cave of Tzidkiyahu. Velo kim arat Tzidkiyahu de'ilu hayta chareva. That if it was desolated, which means like now that Me'arat Tzidkiyahu it doesn't have inhabitants, ve'hacha yeshiva. And here the Braita referring to a cave that it is inhabitants. So basically, we go now to a story that we can derive several things from this important story. Mar Yehuda ashkichnu livnei mevarcheta. Mar Yehuda, he once found the residence of a city called Mevarchata. Dekamot ve'eruvayu bevet dishna deve agovar. So what did they do? There is a house called Agovar, that it was within the city limits of Marcheta. So even it was a large building, people put the eruv on the distance part of the synagogue, because they hold that even you put the eruv in the side that's close to the city, you measure the limit from the far part of the building, because the entire building hold it's like 4 cubits for someone who put the eruv, like the sages said. So now here's a issue. They placing the eruv inside the synagogue. So what does that mean? So there is a famous Rabbi Yaakov Emdin who said that the whole idea of putting the eruv in a synagogue is a issue that Rav Yehuda and rabbis disagree in a sense that we're not allowed to drive any type of benefit. So in a synagogue, basically we're not supposed to eat and drink in a synagogue because it's a holy place. But since the Shabbat permitted eating and drinking there, in a certain situations. For example, you have a Siyum Masechet, etc. Right? So therefore they allow to put the Eruv there as well. So he said, Amar lehu gevu behudfei, put the Eruv further in the synagogue. Why? Ki heiche de lichter lehudfei. The reason is because it will more be permitted to you. So you can go further on Shabbat. Which means, Mar Yehuda hold the same as Rabbi Akiva, that if someone places Eruv in the place that is totally circle around with partitions, so you can measure the Eruv not outside of those partitions, but from the place that he put the Eruv. So it means the more you distance the Eruv from the synagogue, the more they can go in a distance. So he said, because we measure from the place that you deposit the Eruv, so you can go further on, instead of going just from the edge of the city. Amar lehu Rava, Amar le Rava, Rava said to Mar Yehuda, Palga. Palga meaning you are disputing what the sages said. Be'Eiruvin let dechash leha de Rabbi Akiva. When it's come to Eiruvin, no one concerned about the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, which means because in Eiruvin we said many times we go by leniencies, and the Ritva said that even usually we don't go by Rabbi Akiva when he is the minority, but here because it's Eruv, you may think that rationally speaking what Rabbi Akiva said makes a lot of sense. So because it makes a lot of sense, even the majority disagree with him, you may hold that you can go by him. But he said here, by Eruv, you go lenient. So basically you measure the limit outside of that synagogue, and is no difference in which location in the synagogue you place the Eruv. Hadran alach keitzad me'abrin, ודעתן הלך, לא נתנשם מנך כיצד מערים, ולא נתנשם מנך, לא בעלמא הדין ולא בעלמא דעתי. So we say that we're going to revisit this chapter in Mitzvah Shem soon again. Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 408. If one places Eruv outside his Shabbat limit, it is invalid. His limit is measured either from his home or from his physical location. If one's Shabbat limit incorporates a city, the following distinction apply. If the entire city is within his limit, it is treated as a 4 cubits. So therefore, he may walk anywhere in the city and still complete the rest of his 2,000 cubit behind the city. However, if its limit does not include the entire city, it's measured like a regular turn. Now, some say that if the entire city is not within his limit, for example, as a measure from the Shabbat resident, he is still permitted to walk to the city itself as long as he does not exit on the other side. That's the Ramah based on Rashi. We ask, what happens if the city is on the edge of some type of water? Can be a flood issue, can be dangerous. So he said, in the case of a city located in the edge of a ravine, which means that is a place a place of fear of, like New Orleans, that is filled with water during the rainy season, but is dry during the rest of the year. If the residents build a pier 4 cubits wide along that water in order to be able to use the water that flows during the rainy season. That water part is considered part of the city. However, if they did not build such a pier, the Shabbat limit is measured from the entrance to the last house as in the other side. That the reef, we follow the halacha by the Gonim that follow the reef in this manner. We discuss also a large city and a small city. The residents of a large city, whose Shabbat limit includes an entire small city, may walk through the small city. The area of that city is considering as though it were only 4 cubits, as the rest of the Shabbat limit is measured from the other side of the city. The resident of small city, however, whose Shabbat limit does not incorporate the entire large city, are permitted to walk through it only until the end of their 2,000 cubit limit. If they place the Eruv in the large city is considered their Shabbat residence, and they may walk anywhere within the large city as an additional 2,000 cubit. And for those who just sometimes watch the practical halacha more than they focus on the daf, I want to use a picture from Meorot Daf Yomi because it's clarified. It's picture number 230. Small city, everybody see it?
Yes.
Large city. Large city border. A person can walk from here to here, 2,000 cubit. The minute you walk this distance, you cover the small city. The city border of the small city is here. If you go by 2,000 limit, you are limited how far you can go in the large city. You stop somewhere in the large city because you measure it from this border, which means that people from this city can go for this entire city, but people from the small city are limited for going to the big one. Next halacha, shovet umeniach. One who establishes his Shabbat residence and one who places his Eruv. One who establishes his Shabbat residence in a desolate but inhabitable city or cave, either through his physical presence at the beginning of Shabbat or by placing an Eruv there before Shabbat, may walk through the entire area and 2,000 cubits beyond it. If one establishes his Shabbat residence in an uninhabitable place, he may travel only 2,000 cubits in all directions from that location. The halacha is according to the sages, as explained Rabbi and Rabbi Lazar, and that's Shulchan Aruch Orachaim 408. I want to remind you what Rabbi Yaakov Amdin said, which is also as a practical halacha application. He said that usually we don't use the synagogue for eat and drink, but there are certain circumstances such as siyum, etc., that we use the synagogue, and since the sages permitted eating and drinking there in certain circumstances, they permitted placing an Eruv there as well because of that.
Shula